Conor McGregor just looked at Max Holloway's entire decade of evolution and said he sees nothing. Same reaction. Same movements. No real difference from the kid he beat in 2013. That is either the most reckless thing a returning fighter has said in years, or it is the calculated mind game of a man who genuinely does not respect what Holloway has built since their first fight. And at this point, with both of them about to share a cage again after 13 years, nobody actually knows which one it is. That uncertainty is exactly why this fight has taken over the conversation. Start with what McGregor actually said, because he did not hedge, and the specificity of it matters. He laid out exactly what he plans to do to Holloway with no diplomatic press conference language softening it. He called him cool. He called him his son. He said he signed him back in 2013 and intends to do it again. That kind of direct, unhedged prediction from a fighter coming off a 5, possibly 6-year layoff is either supreme confidence or genuine delusion, and the gap between those two readings is the entire story heading into International Fight Week. Here is what makes the dismissiveness genuinely surprising rather than just standard pre-fight theater. Max Holloway has built one of the most respected resumes in the sport since that 2013 fight. Multiple title defenses. Wins over a long list of ranked contenders. A reputation as one of the most durable, technically sound volume strikers the featherweight division has ever produced. The kind of fighter analysts specifically point to when discussing 5-round championship pace that simply does not deteriorate. None of that is genuinely in dispute by anyone who has actually watched him compete over the last decade. And McGregor looked directly at all of it and said he sees almost no meaningful difference. Same reactions. Same movements. He acknowledged Holloway picked up additional tools after their first encounter but immediately undercut the concession. There's only one, he said, meaning himself, meaning the gap that matters most is not actually closed regardless of what technical additions Holloway has made. Whether that is genuine belief or a calculated mind game designed specifically to get under Holloway's skin is something only McGregor actually knows. But it is functioning exactly as intended either way. It is generating headlines, getting clipped and replayed across every MMA channel, and pulling people into a conversation about a fight that, 3 weeks ago, was not guaranteed to happen at all. Now address the elephant in the room directly, because it deserves more weight than the pre-fight hype cycle typically gives it. McGregor has not competed in roughly 5 years, possibly closer to 6 by the time this fight actually happens. That is not a minor layoff. That is one of the longest active competition gaps for a fighter returning to face a genuine top 5 opponent in recent UFC history. And the specific concern being raised by people who have watched combat sports closely is not really about his hands or his power. It is about whether the timing, the reflexes, and the conditioning required to handle 5 rounds against championship-level pace are things that can simply be willed back into existence through preparation alone, or whether they require the kind of continuous competitive reps that McGregor has not had in half a decade. The comparison being drawn by skeptics is specific and worth sitting with. McGregor's most recent visible appearance in any kind of live combat exchange did not project the sharpness his promotional language is currently selling. The counterpoint people keep raising is blunt. If you want to see what genuine danger looks like right now, you look at fighters who have stayed active and sharp through consistent competition, not at someone returning after this length of absence. That does not mean McGregor cannot win. It means the uncertainty around his actual current form, as opposed to his self-description of his current form, is real and largely unresolved until the cage door actually closes. There is a deeper psychological question buried in this matchup that deserves direct examination, because it goes beyond simple styles and gets at something about who McGregor actually is as a competitor at this stage of his career. If Holloway simply outworks him, not a dramatic knockout, not a controversial stoppage, but 5 rounds of being systematically outpaced and outvolumed by a fighter executing exactly the kind of relentless pressure he is known for, can McGregor actually live with that outcome? His only previous UFC loss came against Dustin Poirier in a fight complicated by a catastrophic leg injury, which gives him a built-in explanation that does not require him to confront a purely competitive defeat. Getting outworked cleanly by Holloway, with no injury narrative available, would be a genuinely new experience for him. Whether that pushes him toward an immediate rematch attempt within months, driven by an inability to sit with that specific kind of result, or whether it changes his entire calculus about continuing to compete, is a real open question that nobody currently has an answer to. The legacy dimension of this rematch runs deeper than a simple measure of current skill, and it deserves to be treated as a genuinely separate storyline from the competitive prediction. Both men have lived completely different careers since 2013. Holloway was a young fighter still proving he belonged in the contender conversation when they first met. He has since become a Hall of Fame caliber striker with one of the most complete resumes in the division's history. McGregor, meanwhile, became one of the most commercially significant athletes the sport has ever produced, and also stepped away from competition repeatedly for long stretches, chasing other ventures, other headlines, other fights that had nothing to do with this specific rivalry. When people say this rematch is about more than who throws the better combination, that framing is accurate. It is about two men who took radically divergent paths after a single shared starting point, walking back into the same cage with considerably more on the line than a simple record update. The location shift matters technically and should not be overlooked in the broader narrative. This is not a featherweight rematch. It is happening at welterweight, a meaningfully different physical context than their 2013 meeting, with both men carrying more size and presumably different power dynamics than their first encounter produced. That detail alone makes direct stylistic comparisons to the first fight less reliable than the pre-fight talk sometimes suggests. Holloway's own motivation for taking this fight, delivered directly and without the layered mind games McGregor specializes in, is worth hearing in its simplest form. He said this is the fight he wants. That he is training right now specifically because it is all he wants. That when they fought originally, he was still essentially a kid finding his footing in the sport. There is a specific irony worth noting here. Holloway's loss of the BMF title earlier in his career is part of what positioned him for this specific opportunity now, a detail that adds an unexpected layer to how this rematch actually came together. McGregor's framing of his own readiness for the broader fight week experience, something he has not had to navigate in years, was direct rather than nostalgic in tone, though the underlying sentiment carried real weight. He acknowledged that the press tour, the obligations, the full promotional cycle can be genuinely taxing. But he said he is ready for it, and specifically named what he is most looking forward to: the walk, the crowd, the exchanges, and what he is calling a dominating performance. There was also a smaller, more human admission buried in the same conversation, that being back with his longtime coach John Kavanagh, back with the full team, carries a specific nostalgic charge that comes specifically from having had this taken away for an extended period and now getting it back. Here is where the actual prediction landscape sits, and it is genuinely split rather than leaning decisively in either direction. One camp believes McGregor still has one more significant moment available to him, that he has produced shocking performances before against opponents who were supposed to have a clear advantage on paper, and that betting completely against him, given his track record through the featherweight and lightweight divisions in his prime, would be premature regardless of how much time has passed. The other camp points to something harder to dismiss. Holloway's pace simply does not relent. His volume across 5 rounds has proven to be a different kind of problem than a 3-round fight presents, and cardio, volume, and championship-level experience are 3 categories where his resume speaks for itself in ways that are difficult to argue against on paper. Nobody actually knows which version of this fight shows up once the cage door closes. The explosive, single exchange-ending McGregor that built his entire reputation a decade ago. A grinding 5-round war of attrition where Holloway's volume slowly breaks everything down by the championship rounds. Or some third outcome that neither side currently sees coming. That genuine uncertainty, the fact that credible analysts cannot confidently call this one way or the other, is exactly why this fight has held the sport's attention since the moment it was confirmed, and why that grip on the conversation is not going to loosen between now and the night the cage door actually closes.